Ryan, who I just talked about, was the sales manager, and I was kind of sharing my heart with him of struggling. He was like, hey, dude, we need a sales guy right now. He's like, I don't know if you are interested in that at all. He's like, but you could obviously sell anything. Yeah, he's like, come on over and sell if you want to sell, if you don't know what else you're going to do. So I'm like, because that was part of my worries. I was like, what does somebody who's been a pastor for 20 years do? Right? What's the job market for a washed up pastor, right? I don't see that anywhere on Indeed or anything like that, right? There's no category for washed up pastor anywhere.
All right, welcome back everybody to Always Level Up, the podcast. We have a special guest today. His name is Steve McNary. Steve is a father, a pastor, a husband, a great man, an athlete. He has some wonderful stories that he's going to share with us today. Also a former CEO of Southwest Exteriors. And we're going to talk a little bit about his journey and how he's leveled up in his life. Steve, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here, man.
How you doing today?
Doing all right. I'm breathing again, so that's good.
Right on. So Steve, for everybody that doesn't know you, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago area, Chicagoland. About to be 51 years old. Got an amazing wife that I've been married to almost 30 years now.
Wow.
My high school sweetheart. We have a...
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, it is for sure, man. Especially in this day and age of marriages and everything else. So we've survived. As we go through some of the stories, it's amazing how we survived. So without God, it wouldn't have happened.
Amen.
Have a 23-year-old daughter who, again, was a blessing, wasn't supposed to happen. And then we have a little 10-year-old that we foster adopted. So a couple girls in our lives. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Love it. Family is key. And, I have a big family, so I value it. It wasn't all planned out, but
right. Yep.
But God has his ways of using our children to help us get on the right path. So let's talk a little bit, Steve, about where your first level up began.
Yeah. So first one was kind of heading off into the ministry. So I grew up family. My dad was an entrepreneur. Always figured I'd head into the family business. Mm-hmm. He had a business degree and everything else, but as a dry cleaner, he still got up at 4:30 every morning, worked really hard. Can still remember him as a kid whistling as he'd come up the driveway, coming home every night right around 6 o'clock for dinner. That was the call that Dad's home. Right? Yeah, you could always tell Dad was coming home, man. And
That's
so
awesome.
I had a great childhood. Can't say that it was a horrible childhood or any of that kind of a story in my life. Amazing family that I grew up with. Had two sisters and a brother, my mom and dad. But then tragedy just struck and my life was torn apart. My dad died very suddenly of a heart attack when I was 15 years old.
Wow. That's got to be tough. 15 years old, and that's usually when a young man needs his father the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Our relationship is, I was in kind of that awkward phase of you're kind of trying to start to be your own man, right? And trying to test the waters of, I'm cool enough where I really don't need my parents. You think you know everything in the world, right? When you're 15 years old and everything else.
But you still need a little bit of guidance, right?
Exactly.
Just show me the right way.
Right. And you're sitting there and kind of pushing that and testing the waters and everything else. And at the same time, my dad was always pushing on me saying, hey man, you're smarter than I was. I'm still doing, 4:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock at night. He's like, you're going to go to college. You're going to be earning some degrees and be a businessman, be a lawyer, do whatever you want to do. Don't work as hard physically as I have to work. So that kind of set my life into a tailspin at 15 years old. Mm-hmm.
So he spoke a lot of goodness on you and put a lot of positivity in your mind.
Yeah.
What you could accomplish. That's awesome.
Yeah, our parents were always very encouraging of us as kids. People want to say, hey, you look at your kids and say, hey, you can do anything you want to do, be anything you want to be. Mm-hmm. It's actually not true when you think about it.
You're right. I don't think I could become an NBA basketball player.
No, exactly. Right? My daughter's 5'1", 94 pounds. I mean, she's ripped, no fat on her body, but she's never going to play in the NBA, right? It's just not going to happen. I mean, God's designed us certain ways. He's gifted us certain ways, and you can accomplish amazing things once you find out how you're wired and what that giftedness is, right? But you can't do anything you really wanted to do.
I like to say anything's possible.
Anything's possible, right? Within the realm of how God's created you, et cetera, et cetera. This is one of my little pet peeves. But,
Right on.
So,
fair enough.
So my wheels spun for a few years, and I think I told you the other day when we were talking, I'll just try and summarize it real quick, man. Went through like two different universities, 3 different colleges, and the 2 universities within my college years.
Right.
Was all over the map with everything else. We got a couple new pastors at the church that I grew up in, and they're pushing on me saying, hey, you've got some gifts, you can do this, you should do that. Spinning my wheels for what I really wanted to do.
And you were really young at that time.
I was flying my way through school. I was one of those kids that was actually cursed with the ability to cram the night before on everything, great short-term memory. Didn't really have to apply myself to get through school really well and all that kind of stuff. So I was graduating at 20 years old already out of college. Wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do next. And, you know, when you get a couple pastors pushing on you, and I was having fun helping with the youth group and stuff like that, high school youth group, I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to go to seminary. And
you just want to be a good person.
Right, exactly. Right. I'm like, okay,
that's it.
That's what I'm supposed to do now.
God,
right?
is that you?
Right. That's what I'm supposed to do now. So that's the deal. I wanted to go into federal law enforcement. I wanted to swing through the jungle and be a DEA agent and do all this kinds of crazy stuff in federal law enforcement. And I was an athlete through high school and college, and adrenaline junkie, and really wanted to chase after that kind of stuff. Don't blame my mom at all. She didn't, she had just lost her husband. I was a sophomore in high school when that happened, so she wasn't real excited about me going crazy and doing stuff like that. I had gotten into, grew up in Chicago, gotten into Stanford, but she didn't want me moving across the country to even go to college. She wanted me staying closer to home.
So a lot of people that you cared about was influencing your decisions on which way you were going to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. My wife, now my wife, I asked her, proposed to her between junior and senior year of college. And she said, absolutely. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but let's talk about this federal law enforcement thing. Right. So
it's a little risky.
Right. I'm like, okay, I'm on my 3rd or 4th major. I still want to graduate college in 4 years. What do? I'm going to finish one with a criminal justice degree. I start searching out law schools. Right. And so but that's finally when I was like, okay, fine. I'll surrender to you in this whole thing. Right. And that's kind of when the level up happened, was when I sat back and went, okay, I surrender, right? I'm going to turn this thing over to you. What do you really want me to do? And that's when the road to seminary
right. So
kind of started to happen.
You chose to live a God-centered life.
Yep.
Right, and serve.
Right.
Wow. And when you're that age, how does that feel? Like, you're 20 years old, and you're like, I'm going to do the seminary school. I'm going to go down this path. It's a big commitment, and you give up a lot of your hopes and your dreams in terms of what you wanted to do professionally. How did that feel in terms when you were like, hey, I'm going to surrender, and this is what I'm going to do for the next 20 years?
It was interesting because up to the point of my dad dying, I felt like I was in control of everything in my life. Right. I can control the grades I got. I was the captain of every team I was on.
Right.
Home life was great. Everything was fantastic. But all of a sudden, here was this thing that was out of my control, and I could do nothing about it.
Right.
And that was like this pivotal moment in my life where I was faced with this thing that I couldn't fix. Right. I couldn't fix this, and I couldn't do anything about it. And that's when I truly had to just sit back and go, okay, I'm actually not in control of everything. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to just sit back and give some of this to God.
Right. Have some faith.
Yeah. Right. There's certain things, he doesn't expect us to just sit on the couch the rest of our lives. Right. He gives us some responsibility, and there's stuff we have to do. But at the same time, there's stuff that we have to release to him and let go to him. Right. And so that first big moment like that was when my dad died, and that really hit me strong and hard there. But then heading to seminary was kind of the same thing. But there was some confirmation in there because there was some spiritual attack that happened almost immediately there as well, because our wedding was supposed to happen between my wife me graduating college and then heading off to grad school. And literally a month before the wedding was supposed to take place, we find out that my wife had her first round of cancer.
Right. Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, here's this, okay, literally a month before I turned 21 and 2 months before she was going to turn 21, she's got cancer. It's not supposed to happen to young women at 21, 20 years old already, right?
Right, exactly.
And so again, there's this, I jump in and I'm a problem solver. I'm like, okay, we got to go see the doctors. We got to have surgery. We got to, whatever needs to happen. Yeah, we're going to fix this, right? And as husbands and as dads, we still want to do that, right? It's like, we're going to fix this. We're going to make this happen. And I've always been, God's given me gifts to do that too. I can see things that other people can't see sometimes and fix stuff. But it was also confirmation on, and I used to tell people this when I was doing full-time ministry. I was like, if Satan's not showing up in your life, you're probably not doing much to grow the kingdom of God.
Yeah, you're probably not doing right.
Right? Because you're no threat to him.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's got you already.
Right? Exactly. He's looking at you going, I don't need to worry about him over there, but I need to go do some stuff to try and get this guy off track and try to mess him up a little bit because he's starting to level up and do some stuff for the kingdom and do some stuff in his own life and to do some stuff in some other people's lives. And so, our life's been full of a lot of spiritual attack, and this is kind of when, stuff still really started to kick in and start rolling. So, yeah.
So getting through that, and what did you do in terms of the process of recovery for your wife, and how did you put it in God's hands to help y'all get through this situation with your wife and the cancer?
So he already had a plan for all of that. So the seminary that we had chose to go to was Reformed Theological Seminary down in Orlando, Florida. We were up in Chicago. So canceled our honeymoon, just spent a couple nights downtown Chicago. Hopped in the car a couple weeks after that because she had to go through all this radioactive iodine treatment. I couldn't get in a bed with her for another 2 weeks after that because her body was still giving off radiation. So that's a wonderful way to start your marriage, not being able to sleep with your wife.
Right, exactly.
Because it could have caused all kinds of issues in my body, is what the doctor kept telling us.
Exactly.
So we get down there, and there just happened to be one of the most well-known, it was thyroid cancer. One of the most well-known endocrine cancer doctors in the country was in Orlando.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, okay, she gets this cancer, but we're headed to Orlando, Florida for my 3 years of seminary, and here's literally one of the best doctors to handle that kind of cancer in the country is like 5 miles from where we were going to be for seminary.
Wow, that's awesome.
Right?
What a blessing.
Right?
Like
and that's not just a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it's like, it's unfortunate that this is happening, but hey, God's like, hey, I got you.
Right?
I'll take care of you guys.
Right?
Yeah.
So there was already some stuff in play there, ready to go. And we just kept plugging forward. We're like, all right, what else are we going to do except keep moving forward in life? Right?
What can you do? Right?
Right?
Yeah, it's like, you can sit back and be upset, or you can, just take action and do whatever it is that you have to do to heal, to recover, to do the work, all those things that come with it. So moving beyond that, how did things change and evolve over time through seminary? So
yeah, through seminary, I struggled a lot because my thoughts of seminary were like, this is going to be the most glorious place on earth, right? This is where you're going to get close to God, and this is going to be like walking the halls of heaven as walking out of seminary, right? So first off, academically, it was brutal because I skated through high school and college, not having to study, still being towards the top of class and graduating with honors and all that kind of stuff. But I got to graduate school, it's a whole different ballgame, man.
Right. You actually have to do some critical thinking.
Yes. Yes. And
some research.
I got to grad school and I found out, crap, I don't know how to study. I don't know how to be a student. And you can't just skate your way through grad school, man. You actually have to learn and do research and produce papers, and you can't just rip that out the night before it's due kind of stuff at the grad school level, man. So I struggled initially there and had to figure out, okay, I got to figure out how to do this. My wife now, she went to school while we were there. So we're both working. I'm delivering pizzas at night for Papa John's. She's waiting tables at Pizza Hut. We had a bunch of support coming from back home and family and home church. But it was kind of cool because we had pizza everywhere in the fridge every night. And so that's just what we ate. And we're plugging away at school and doing our thing.
You must have worked out a lot.
Right? Right? But then the kind of the disappointment of that was here. I thought this was going to be the holiest place on earth, right? Like, well, how could you get any closer to God than being in a seminary?
Right.
But there was just all kinds of arguments, theological arguments in class and all kinds of garbage like that going on. And so then I start arguing in my head. I'm like, man, God, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life.
Right.
Like, no, I don't. This is not what I want to do. And that's when he really put church planting on my heart. I was like, I want to hang out with people who are broken and busted and messed up and that don't know you. And those are the kind of people that I want to spend my time with.
Right.
Not the kind of people that I'm in class with right now that want to argue these minutia issues that, yeah, they matter, but they don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They matter,
what are we
but they
fixing
don't.
right now?
Right.
Yeah,
They matter, but they don't.
You're stepping into your mental capacity to want to fix things and make things better, and you're like, it's not happening here. I need to get somewhere else.
Right, and they're not salvation issues. Right. You know what I mean, they're theological issues which are important to argue out at a certain level and everything else. But is it going to matter to the guy who lives next door to you, whose marriage is falling apart and he's busted and he's broken and he's addicted to porn and his wife is ready to leave him, et cetera, et cetera? Everything you're arguing about right now is not going to matter to him. He just needs to be introduced to Jesus. You know what I mean? I was like, that's what I want to go do.
Right. Where did that come from? How, did that just like come on your heart that you wanted to do that work?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was God just getting to me. We had one prof who was all about church planting, and I think I was like, okay, finally a class that I can enjoy, you know. I think it was part of it.
You know what I think? I think it was your adrenaline junkie.
Could be, right?
Like, I need to do something. I need to take some action. I need to get out of here. I need to be moving.
Yeah.
I need to be shaking some hands.
Right? And I mean, even while we were there, I was having more fun hanging out with the friends I had made delivering pizzas with at Papa John's, who I'd go fishing with, and we'd deliver pizzas till midnight, and then him and I would throw his flat bottom fishing boat in the back of my pickup truck, and we'd go fish these lakes in pure darkness in Florida with literally alligators swimming. Yeah, it was so cool, man. Alligators swimming around and everything else. But he was a cool Jewish dude who didn't believe in Jesus at all. But I loved freaking hanging out with him and just talking about stuff, and not Bible beating him or anything else, but just talking about him and his marriage and the struggles he was having and the struggles I was having and everything, just being friends with this guy. And I'm like, why am I enjoying spending more time with him and hanging out with him than hanging out with my classmates? Because my classmates want to argue about stupid crap all the time. That's why. Right. You know what I mean?
Yep,
and so I think God just kept building that stuff on my heart and building that stuff on my heart and just led me down that church planting road. So.
Nice.
Yep.
So that led to you eventually planting your first church.
Yeah. So I served my time as a youth pastor. I'm kidding, man. I love youth pastors. I love kids. Got out of seminary. Unfortunately, I was told, hey, you're too, because I was only just barely turning 23 or something like that, 24-ish when I got out of seminary. So I was told, you're too young to do anything other than be a youth pastor, which is crazy, man. I had the most energy in the world to go out and plant a church at that time. So went and was a associate pastor and youth pastor in rural Iowa. Amazing experience to go out and work with a bunch of dairy farmers and hog farmers and good old salt to the earth people that were just amazing. Did that for a couple of years, and then went to Southern California to plant a church out there.
Wow, all the way from up north,
Chicago
Midwest,
to Florida for grad school, to Northwest Iowa in the farm country, and then to Southern California.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a trip.
Right?
What a ride.
Right? But I love change. I live as an extrovert, and adrenaline, like you said, I truly can. I'm the guy who has never met a stranger. Like I said, I could sit in a bar all day long and talk to folks who are in there without a problem. So.
Right on. So you taking on that mission to plant a church. When did they give you that responsibility or allow you to go do that?
So it's kind of weird. You have to go through all these assessments, and I want to make sure you have the right gifts and calling and all that kind of stuff. And so I started doing that while I was on staff at that church in Iowa, and they confirmed my calling to do that. And then my wife and I just started praying through. And when we visited this part of Southern California, it was just put on our hearts that, hey, this is where we think God wants us to do this.
Right. So that was heavy on your heart.
That was heavy on our heart to go there and do that.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah. And the cool thing is our hearts and lives were transformed when we went there. Was radically different from where, how we grew up and how we saw church growing up. We grew up in the typical church where everybody rolled in on Sunday morning, hopped out of the car, and everybody was fine.
Everybody's perfect.
Big smile on your face. We're all fine. Everybody's good. You could have been yelling and screaming at each other at the house on Sunday morning over breakfast, and even in the car on the way there.
Get it together. We're going to the church.
Right? Right? But as soon as you pull in that parking lot, everybody smiles. Everybody walks in. Everybody's perfect. Oh, how are you doing this morning? Oh, we're great. Right? You know, and everybody's polished and clean because we have to be, because that's what church is all about, right? We bring our best to God. We put on our best. We always wore, you know, dress clothes to church and everything else, Sunday morning and Sunday night. And, you know, thinking back on it, that was so, the intent was amazing. The intent was you want to bring your best to God, right? But as what often happens is there's a shadow effect of stuff like that. The shadow effect was people would fake it. They would fake the brokenness and the hurt and everything else that was going on inside of them, right? And so we're planting this church in Southern California, and we're in a leased building, and all of a sudden, NA, Narcotics Anonymous groups, and AA, Alcoholics Anonymous groups, show up during the week one time. And they're like, hey, would you mind, can we use some of your space during the week for our groups to start to meet? And I'm like, heck yeah, please come and start using our space. So they came and started using our space. Then they started showing up on Sunday mornings. Then they started joining our small groups, and started joining some of the small groups that my wife and I were part of as well. And all of a sudden, they start sharing in the same way that they start sharing in their groups in NA and AA, which is, you know, now that I've learned through that whole process, it's you don't hold back.
Yeah. You got to be brutally honest.
Yeah. You know, they've learned through the 12-step
transparency.
Yes, they've learned through the 12-step process that if you hide anything, if you keep anything back, you're not going to get healed in that process, which is the way things should be as you walk with Christ, right? And as you walk with brothers and sisters in the kingdom.
Right, confess your sins, right?
Yes.
Confess and you be forgiven, right?
Yes, right? And at first I was like, you can't talk like that. This is a church group, right?
You're like, hold on,
right?
What's going on here?
Right, exactly. I'm like, oh, you know, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? But then that was kind of the way my ministry life kind of leveled up, though. God just put that huge on my heart. He's like, all of a sudden I'm like, this is the kind of conversation I bet Jesus had with his disciples.
Right. Yeah.
This is the kind of conversation we'd be having if Jesus was here.
Right.
Right? Because he sees right through the baloney that we try and shield, the masks that we try and put on, the stuff that we try and show to the world that we're all good and we're fine and we're perfect, right?
Jesus spent time with the people that needed him the most, right?
Yes. Right? That's why he looked at the Pharisees and the Sadducees and said, get out of here, you vipers, right? And he wanted to go hang out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes and everybody else because they had already been shoved aside by society. So they had nothing left to hide, right? They had nothing left to hide. And that's why he was like, hey, I'll go hang with you, right?
Let me show you the way.
Right? Exactly.
There's a better way.
Yeah.
And you know it's okay.
Right?
You know?
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so that radically transformed the way that I have seen what ministry looks like, what church looks like, what your walk with Christ should look like, and everything else.
Right. That's awesome.
So that was a huge moment for us.
Yeah, I think that's such a blessing, you know, especially life, the way it throws its challenges at us. And, you know, a lot of times we don't understand why things happen and why we go through those things. And, you know, I remember, you know, reading the scripture and it talks about how God, you know, allows us to struggle and allows us to persevere and allows us to, you know, bring us closer to faith and hope, right? So that way it brings us closer to God. So, you know, in those times and you know, bringing people together is that where the opportunity lies to, you know, really show them like, hey, look, you're not the only one. You're not alone, right? Everybody's going through something somewhere, somehow, some way. But you know, there's something better for us at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
There's light at the end of the tunnel somewhere.
Right.
So through seminary, you continue to progress through that. How long did you spend with the church?
In SoCal,
Yep.
in church in general. So in SoCal, I think we were there about 10 years. And then I had a buddy who started talking to me about church planting. And I was like, dude, don't do it alone. And it could be the loneliest thing you're ever going to do. Man, if you're out there listening right now, pray for your pastor and be friends with him. It's professional ministries, some of the loneliest gigs out there. So that's what I told him. I was like, don't do that alone. So we came together to San Antonio. That's how I got here to start a church here.
Awesome.
Yep. And probably about 20 years is what I.
So 20 years, 10 years out there in SoCal, and then you came to San Antonio, 10 years here.
Yep.
Awesome. So through that progression in ministry, what changed? What changed along the way?
So church planting, I love church planting, man. I love it early on because my focus was always about reaching people who don't know Jesus yet, right? Like the dirty, messed up, muddy stuff. And you can always do that at the start. And like I said, I'd rather hang out in a bar with a bunch of people that don't know Jesus and talk about, man, that kind of stuff is funny because I'll hang out with them and we'll be friends. And I always try and steer the conversation towards them. And the easiest thing to get people to talk about is themselves.
Right on.
Right? You know, right?
That's the key to networking.
Yeah, right? It's the key to great networking, man.
Yeah, ask questions.
Yeah, right? And at the end of the night, they're like, man, that guy's a great conversationalist. And I'm like, I didn't say anything all night long. I just let you talk, right? I just kept it going. And so if they ever ask me like, hey, what do you do? And I would just kind of avoid answering that and steer the question right back at them, right? But eventually they'd always find out I'm a pastor. It's like,
what are you doing here?
Right? Exactly. And sometimes this would, like after a month of building a friendship though, right? And then it would always be so funny because I'd see them like, oh, and then like they rewind the conversation in their head, like, how many F-bombs did I drop? How many bad jokes did I say to this guy, right? And I'm like, you don't have to apologize, man. It's cool. Don't worry about it. So I love the early years in church planting. And I just want to preface this with, I'm not an anti-church guy in any way at all, okay? I love the early years in the church planting and the focus on trying to reach people that don't know Jesus yet and people that are still broken and hurt and busted, which I say still hurt and broken and busted. We're all hurt and broken and busted till the day that we go home, right? We're always going to be that way is the true reality. But I love when the focus is on finding like the really muddy folks, right? And what seems to always happen in church plants is they start to grow and you attract people like that. But then as they do start to grow and word starts to spread around, hey, there's this cool new church, blah, 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 blah. Then the clean, polished, we're all fine on Sunday morning folks start to show up. And then there becomes this push back and forth on, do we start offering this and offering that the traditional church always looks like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there becomes this internal battle of, can you really keep that identity of we're really truly here to reach broken people and put broken people first before we put all that other stuff first. And honestly, it just becomes weary when you're at the helm of trying to lead something like that. And it just becomes about this internal battle all the time.
And that battle is something that's very draining.
Oh yeah. It's very draining, man. And again, I'm not an anti-church guy at all. But me personally, I struggle sometimes with, especially after being in the inside of it for so long, I struggle with, and there's some churches that do a wonderful job of not letting this be what happens. But sometimes when you look at the amount of resources, time, energy, and effort that a church puts into making Sunday morning happen, there's far too much energy, resources, time, and effort in making just Sunday morning happen.
Right.
And there's way too much other stuff being missed that should be getting done. And I think that gets missed sometimes.
Right.
And so I was struggling with that again. And what am I supposed to do with that? A lot of other challenges were happening along the way with that. My wife's cancer recurred in 2010, her thyroid cancer. They found breast cancer in her in 2013. So we're going through a lot of physical physical challenges that were going along with that as well. We ended up foster adopting the little one that we were talking about. So just some crazy life stuff that was going on through this. The spiritual attacks never stopped. We bought a brand new house when we were moving into town here, had it built when we were still in Southern California. It burned to the ground 3 months after we were in it.
So you have another series of
dude, we could do a series of 10 podcasts,
right?
Just on
all the events
the crap
that took place
that we've gone through in life, right? The crazy stuff that we've endured through life, but I was just sitting there, and my heart was just getting more and more unsettled again, and finally I was just like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think God is just releasing me from full-time professional ministry.
Right. Yeah. You felt, hey, the work's been done. You've done good in this time.
Right.
In your service.
And then crazily at the same time, I'd gotten to know tons of people doing block parties in our neighborhood and everything else. And one of them was a guy, Ryan Houchin, super awesome dude, who back before Gold's in town here became Gold's, it was Spectrum Health Clubs, right? You remember those? And he was the GM of the biggest one in town here, had moved from SoCal to do that. And I got him into mountain biking, and I got to like super high level racing mountain bikes. And he was riding them, and he was like, dude, would you come teach a class? And I was like, I don't want to teach a spin class.
I'm a mountain biker. What are you talking about?
But I did. I loved it, dude. I loved it. And I loved it for a number of different reasons. I love being around people, man. And I was like, this is another way for me to network, like you said, right? And so I built this whole nother tribe in my life of gym people. And I started teaching classes all the time at the gym. And so I had that whole thing. So this whole time of my heart just struggling with, and I'm feeling God's releasing for me from the church. At the same time, Gold's is starting to push on me a little bit to get into management there. Or Spectrum, I can't remember who they were at that point in time, but they're talking to me about getting into management. A gal here in town, Becky, her and her husband were starting Joyride Cycling Studios. You know who those folks are.
Worked out there before.
Yeah, right. They're awesome folks, and they were sitting down and talking to me about, hey, come be our superstar cycling instructor, train everybody else, and that was an amazing opportunity. And then I think it was about 7 folks from Southwest Exteriors were attending Rock Hills, the church that Dave and I had started, and Ryan, who I just talked about, was the sales manager, and I was kind of sharing my heart with him of struggling. And he was like, hey, dude, we need a sales guy right now. He's like, I don't know if you are interested in that at all. He's like, but you could obviously sell anything. He's like, come on over.
You're a very likable guy.
Right? Yeah, he's like, come on over and sell if you want to sell, if you don't know what else you're going to do. So I'm like, because that was part of my worries. I was like, what does somebody who's been a pastor for 20 years do? Right? What's the job market for a washed up pastor, right? I don't see that anywhere on Indeed or anything like that, right? There's no category for washed up pastor anywhere. So,
oh man.
So,
what am I gonna do?
Right?
Where am I gonna go?
Right? What am I gonna do? Where am I gonna go?
God, I need your help.
Right? So again, I'm sorting through all that and trying to figure out what to do, and God really put on my heart to, he was like, well, some of it was practicality. I was like, I heard Ryan was telling me he left Gold's because they treated their management so poorly. That's why he went to Southwest.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, that doesn't sound like a great option.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, Gold's. Sorry, Gold's gym people out there. Just what I've heard. Loved Becky and her husband, but my thought was, I can be their superstar lead cycling instructor now, but what happens when I'm 55 and gray and you can't retire from that at 70 years old, right?
Right, exactly. We got Steve.
Right? And I'm like, spin, turn the pedals. But then I'm thinking, okay, I'll go into business. I love business. I was bivocational all the time when I was planting churches. I ran my own business when I was in college, ran my own little business when I was in college and in grad school. My dad was a business guy. I'd always been around business. That didn't scare me now. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into the business world. But then, there's
sales too at that. You're
right?
going to sales.
Sales. And
I was like, okay,
right?
it's a different animal.
Right. I'm like, okay, I'll take it.
Hey, but you've been selling Jesus, right?
Right.
God's been empowering you, preparing you for that.
So that's what got me into Southwest Exteriors.
Awesome.
Yep.
So you took the job
Yeah.
as a salesman.
Yep.
Right. And your main product you were selling were windows?
Replacement windows, replacement siding, and replacement doors.
Wow. And I know Southwest Exteriors windows are good quality windows, so
Yep.
there's a nice price tag attached to them.
Yep.
But so to be able to sell that, and I think that says a lot. But you were one of their top salesmen, weren't you?
Yeah. I mean, we had a great. There were only 4 of us at the time, and it was a great sales team. We did really well. It varied, who was kind of at the top, but it really, we were competitive with each other and had some fun doing that. But it was really more of a camaraderie. It wasn't about who was the best and who was at the top, because it was really just about success in doing that. But did that for about a year and a half, and then Southwest Exteriors is a really unique company. Christ-centered, faith-driven. Scott considers himself the steward of the company, but then there's always somebody else that really runs the company and runs the day-to-day and everything else. That person holds the title of CEO now. But back then, at one point in time, Scott had kind of pulled me aside in the kitchen one time and looked at me and said, "Hey, God has told me you're a high-capacity servant leader."
Right.
And I looked at him and said, "So what does that mean?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, I don't know either." He said, "Okay, well, we'll just keep walking and figure that out." So it's like a year and a half into this thing, and the guy who was holding that seat of leading the daily operations and all that kind of stuff left. And so that person also works with what is called the TLC there, the Team Leadership Council, which is made up of key members of the team. And Scott got together with that Team Leadership Council, and they, after, I don't even know, it's kind of like the Illuminati. No, I'm just kidding.
This super high elite group running the world.
They all have a ring that you have to kiss and everything else. So now they went through their process, and whatever they did back then, went through their process, and they asked me if I would fill that position. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. For a number of different reasons. I love leadership. I love leading people. I believe that's the way God has always wired me to do that. I think, like I mentioned before, I've been the captain of every team I'd ever been on. And I think that's what I'm passionate about, is leading people, man. And also the sales gig there is amazing, but you have to work a lot of Saturdays. You have to work a lot of evenings because it's in-home sales. You got to be there when people are home.
Right.
And with my little one that was at home that we had foster adopted, that was impacting that a little bit. So
what actually?
So I went after that.
What actually drove you in sales, though? I think to sell something, it's you got to know your product. Right?
Yeah.
You got to know your product. You got to believe in the product that you're selling. But it's also, the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And so what part of that was really, did you find the most value when you were, or fulfillment in your work? So
I believed in the product, number one. I believed in the company behind that product, which was huge. And our mission and vision, our values, the company's values are still love and excellence. And that's treating everybody that way, both internally first. And if you treat everybody internally that way, in turn, that'll flow over into the way that you treat the clients, right?
Exactly.
And the company vision and mission statement is to transform lives, again, internally first, by transforming homes to the glory of God.
Yeah.
And the home construction and remodeling industry has a black eye on it.
It does.
Just be honest, right? If you ask most homeowners, what's the worst horror story you have about owning a home? It's usually about a contractor and something they tried to do, remodel a bedroom, a bathroom, or whatever, and the guy took 10 weeks longer than he said he would, or he left halfway through the project with their money, or whatever.
Cut corners. Didn't do the job right.
Right? Whatever it is. And so I loved hearing the stories from our installation team after the project finally got done, of people just looking at them and going, this was amazing.
Right.
From start to finish, from the very first phone call we got from somebody in the inside sales center to when the sales guy hit the house. We don't even call him a sales guy because we're not really selling. We call him design consultants, because that's really what they're there for, is to try and just help the homeowner see their vision and dreams come true.
Right.
To our installation department, which is the best in the country, in my opinion, of really just loving people in their home and honoring them and really treating it like you're in your grandma's house while you're there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And being able to be part of a team in a process like that is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And
it's rare to find, people that do quality work and bring satisfaction to people when they're done with their job, right? A lot of times there might be a job that's finished and somebody's like, you know what, I'm not really happy the way it came out because you left these bubbles here or whatever.
Right.
So being able to perform in that way makes a big difference.
Yeah. And there's another aspect to this whole thing too. So Southwest is part of an organization called C12.
Okay. Yep.
Which is about doing business as a ministry. And C12 is an amazing organization as well. Headquarters is here in San Antonio, nationwide, globally now, actually multiple companies. And so I had already been on a key player board. I was going to be able to move to a CEO board then, which is 12 CEOs get together one day a month and literally get to pick each other's brains, talk about problems, issues, take a deep dive into one business month, but then also just talk about how can we do ministry better and use our businesses better to do ministry. And my heart and the conversations I was already having with my wife was, I love people. I love Jesus. I love introducing people to Jesus. I could lead a company now and be way more effective and have way more influence on the 50, 60 employees and subcontractors and all of those folks there than I ever could have had in the lives of people from a pulpit or a platform or whatever else as a pastor. Because I'm now spending 40, 50, 60 hours with these people.
It allows you to get your hands dirty.
Yes.
Right.
Versus an hour on Sunday morning where a third of the people come in after the service starts. Right? And as soon as the service is over, they're buzzing out to their car because they want to get to the restaurant before everybody else does, so they don't have to wait as long to get lunch. Right?
That's true.
Let's just be honest about it, right?
Right on.
and they'll have some great growth in community and everything else, and there are small groups and everything. But I, as a pastor, I wasn't in those small groups. Right? And so there's amazing things. Again, I'm not an anti-church guy. There's amazing things that happen in people's lives in those sectors. But as far as me being able to personally have some impact on some people's lives, as a leader of a company like that, didn't compare to how I could personally impact some people's lives as a pastor.
Right, absolutely.
So to have that kind of an opportunity in front of me and to use a business to be able to do that was amazing. And then just the speed of business versus the speed of the institution of the church and the difference of the way those two move is not comparable.
Right, and then I think on top of that, adding the servant leadership and being able to touch people's lives and making that a core value of the business, I think that is something that's also rare. So what I'm seeing is, your journey from being a pastor and getting into business all the way through, it prepared you for it. It prepared you for that, and it allowed you to touch people's lives in a way that no one else would do it. You know, and I think that's very, very powerful, and that's doing God's work. I think that's a way that God still used you to make a big difference. So that's incredible.
I saw people in our company grow in their faith. I saw them grow as husbands and as wives and as fathers and mothers and just as human beings. And it was sorry, I started to tear up a little bit. It's just freaking awesome to see God transform them and to see them grow as people and as individuals. Man, it was it was an amazing team and an amazing place to be.
Right.
So
so you were there when they became the CEO. They made you the CEO. They said, "Hey, you can do it." What happened after that? How did it go? Where was the company at that point? How did it go while you were there? And
so company was struggling financially at that point in time. Went through some challenges. We lost a product that was a very large part of our revenue. We battled through that. Battled through COVID. which obviously when you selling homes was an issue when COVID hit, right?
Nobody's letting you in your house. In their
Right,
house.
right. So when we
Everybody's
lost,
on lockdown.
yeah, when we lost that major product, leaned into the team and they pulled together and did an amazing job of, let's not be fearful, let's be faithful instead, and we're going to figure this out. And they pivoted and did an amazing job and pulled through that. Same thing happened when COVID hit. It was like, hey guys, we're going to make a bunch of plans. We're going to figure this out, but we're going to follow where God wants to lead us through this. And the team did an amazing job of figuring that out. One of the things I learned in leadership a long time ago was surround yourself with people that are smarter and better than you. Don't be afraid to do that.
Don't be intimidated.
Right. Don't be
threatened.
right. When you hire a marketing guy, he should be better than you at marketing, right?
Exactly.
That's why you're hiring a marketing guy. When your sales leader should be better at you in sales. That's why he's your sales leader, right? Your accounting leader should be better at you than at accounting, right? Those are the people I tried to have around my table. Your installation people, your HR director, that kind of stuff. Hire people that are better at you, right?
The best you can find.
Right. And then don't be intimidated by them, and don't have an ego so big that you think you need to know more than them about those specific areas, right?
Allow them to thrive.
Yeah, just be a great leader and pull that team together and help the team grow and thrive, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we ended up over my tenure leading the company with record growth in revenue and in profit and in profit sharing for the team and all kinds of amazing fun stuff like that. And just
the profit sharing, that's incredible. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah.
You know, in big companies or even small companies, you know, just to have a piece of the pie, and you know, I can imagine that the employees, you know, were grateful for it.
Yeah, grateful for it, and it's a different way to do business when you can, you know, in a full company meeting, stand up there and look at folks and say, hey, think like an owner, because you're going to get a share of the profit like an owner does.
Right.
And so before you throw something away, if you can reuse it again, so you don't have to buy another one first, you know, and save on expenses for everything we do, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Right on. Well, that's been an amazing journey going through that, and along the way, you know, you've encountered some more struggles. That came up. You didn't see coming, huh?
So I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
Memorial Day weekend of 2022. Memorial Day weekend of 2022. I had a brain aneurysm at 6:03 a.m. that Sunday morning, May 22 of 2022. Should have died on the spot. And if I didn't die on the spot, I should be sitting here with a lot of stroke-like deficits. I should have paralysis in my body somewhere. I should have slurred speech. I should have all kinds of stuff going on. Miraculously, I don't have a lot of that. I have a lot of invisible stuff internally going on. I have a 24/7 constant pressure headache that hurts a lot. I get lightning bolts of pain that shoot through my head a lot. I have sound sensitivity. I get blurry vision. I get chronic fatigue. I have insomnia really bad. I have ringing in my ears really bad all the time. I get brain fog sometimes, stuff like that going on. But I'm alive, dude.
Yeah.
So I'm alive. I spent 10 days in the neuro ICU.
Why do you think,
pretty nuts. Pretty crazy story, man.
Why do you think you were able to make it?
I wasn't supposed to. Let's just put it that way.
That's incredible. You did, and you are here.
Yeah, I mean, I was still going to the gym. I was still teaching classes, man. I hung with the whole teaching classes thing. And 3 mornings a week, I'd go teach at 5:30 or 6 a.m. and at Gold's and teach an early morning class, and then get ready at the gym, and then be at the office by 7 a.m. Doctor said the way I physically took care of my body helped, because my dad died at 42 of a heart attack. I told you my dad died. His dad died at 48 of cardiac issues as well. So I always tried to stay in shape. I'd love to say it was because Steve took such great care of himself that, you know, that's the reason why I survived. But the reality is, you know, God still wanted me here, man, because I shouldn't be here at this point in my life. Especially some of the sports related accidents and stuff I've gone through. So yeah, man.
It's been one amazing roller coaster,
Yeah.
to say the
Yeah.
least, right?
Yeah, I had to resign my leadership position at Southwest Exteriors. Had to walk away from the team, which broke my heart, man. That's why I was tearing up a little bit before talking about that team and how awesome they are.
Yeah, I
So-
met Leslie, and she spoke highly of you.
And I've never even met her. So, dude, that's what's crazy about that team, in the impact and influence that you can have in people's
Right.
lives. I've never met Leslie, but she's been working with my team, and you know, they're such amazing folks that apparently, I guess they're still bragging on me to her, even though.
Right.
So,
Well, you know,
crazy, man.
They say when you're a good person, people will talk about it. You know, and I think that says a lot about who you are, your character, and just the difference that you've made in that company and countless lives that you've encountered along the way. And you know, there's many that you haven't even spoken about that you know we've I'm sure that you've touched. And I think, you know, after hearing all these stories, you know, and the growth, the progression, the regressions, and the ups and downs, you know, it builds this certain endurance that allows you to keep going. And it's something that I know that as people, you know, no one's exempt from going through these challenges. Everybody sees a different challenge in a different way. And it could be in the form of a sickness, an illness, or losing a loved one. I mean, it could be something tragic to, you know, personally, whatever it may be, but the fight goes on. You know, we got to keep fighting. We keep getting up. We keep showing up, and we keep doing the work, doing the good work. And I think that's what it's about all the way to the end, you know, because, you know, tomorrow's not promised, but today's the only time that matters. So we live it to the best that we can. And I think that's what's important. And I can see that you do that. You do that daily, you know, you show up, you know, and to be here with me today. And I want you to know, I'm very, very thankful and grateful to that God's allowed you to be here and bless the show with your presence, and hopefully, you know, these stories can touch some lives out there and inspire somebody that's going through a struggle, a challenge, and, you know, something that is not pleasant, but just know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and there's a way. God will be there, but you got to believe.
Yeah.
You got to believe. So Steve, as we're wrapping up, one thing I like to ask is, you know, looking back, everything that you've been through, and if you had to give some advice to your younger self, you know, what would it be? What would be that advice? What would you give yourself?
Wow. Which, like, at what point?
Wherever you needed it the most.
Wherever
you needed it the most. You know?
Buy Amazon?
Buy Amazon.
Can you-
Probably has it already.
All right. Man, some advice to my younger self. You know, I don't think I'd change anything. Even all that stuff, man. I mean, we didn't even get into the 4 miscarriages and some of the other garbage like that we talked about the other day, because I mean my greatest periods of growth in my life have always been through the greatest periods of pain, right? And so I think, but those have also been the times when I've been the closest to wanting to give up, right? And just throw in the towel, or just go do something else, or whatever. So I think the advice would be to not give up. You know, don't give up. I think there have been some times where maybe I've not pursued the dream hard enough that God had put on my heart, and I maybe chose path number 2 because I felt I needed to please people. So I'd probably push on myself a little bit more to follow path number 1 if I needed to, or should have. But it would be to, don't give up on the hard stuff, man, because that's where the growth always happens.
Man, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yep.
And that resonates. It
Right.
really does. It does, because without struggle, there is no growth, right?
Right.
Without the pain, there's no perseverance. And then what if you didn't have any of that? Then what would bring you closer to God?
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And I'm even trying to figure that out now. I'm like, okay, I don't want to have gone through all of this in the literal physical pain I've been in the last 14 months and everything else to go for naught.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm looking at my wife, I'm going, okay, is it motivational speaking? Is it a book? Is it life coaching? Is it business coaching? I'm like, something good has to come out of this, because I don't want to have gone through all this for nothing.
Right.
Right? I don't want to just throw all this away and say, okay, I'm just going to put the rest of my life on cruise control.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt too much to go through all this. You know what I mean? Well, Still does.
In scripture it says, right, whatever you do, if you do it for God, it won't be in vain.
Right.
So I think that you've had that purpose, and you have that purpose, and I think there is going to be those opportunities to continue to touch lives, and you've been doing it, and it's through these stories, and it's through these challenges that bring people closer, so and it's touched me in a way that's also it has allowed me to continue to keep God on the forefront, because no one's exempt, right? We all got to pay a price in one way or another. But there are some rewards. There is light at the end of the tunnel. But we just got to keep going, keep pushing through.
Yeah, man.
Right on. Well, I appreciate your time, Steve. Thank you. And
Good
thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show and grab some gems from Steve here. And be sure to like and subscribe. And if you need some windows, check out Southwest Exteriors.